This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews, or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Tired of your car insurance rate going up, even with a clean driving record? You're not alone. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/Libsyn today. That's JERRY.ai/LIBSYN.
This is the fourth episode in our latest season, featuring missing persons across the United States, and the first in a two-part series. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This episode discusses child endangerment. Listener discretion is advised. This is The Fall Line. When we first met our friend Rhonda Grant Connelly back in 2023, she had not yet formed her advocacy group, Blackfeet MMIP. We connected with her through another colleague and activist, Carolyn DeFord, whose mother, Leona LeClaire Kinsey, we've covered on the show several times before. When we initially spoke with Rhonda, she was grappling with what she viewed as an epidemic on the Blackfeet Nation reservation. So many unsolved disappearances and deaths, cases gone cold, and families who felt that they had nowhere to turn. When she told us the story of her own nephew, Matthew Rattlesnake Grant's murder, she also mentioned other people's lost children: Leo Wagner, Ashley Loring Heavyrunner, Arden Pepion. In 2023, the state's newsroom reported that though Native Americans make up 7% of the state population, they account for 30% of missing people in Montana. That's a reality that Rhonda already knew well. The three people we mentioned, Leo, Ashley, and Arden, they're still missing today. And Arden remains the youngest missing person on the reservation. When we first began our work on Matthew's case, 3-year-old Arden had been missing for 2 years. Now, in the summer of 2026, it's been 5. Rhonda founded Blackfeet MMIP with others, mostly women, who wanted to see change. Billboards have gone up, rallies have been arranged, and direct help, like search parties and DNA initiatives and more, have become a reality because of that work. Matthew's case is still unsolved, and Arden Pepion has not been found. Her family is desperate to finally know what happened on April 22nd, 2021, and to bring her home. The story of what happened to Arden Pepion has always been told one way, at least on the surface. That story goes that she was last seen in the Two Medicine River area, near the water and in what the Independent described as, quote, an informal shooting range, a, quote, gravel pit roughly 20 yards from the riverbank in a wooded area off of Joe Show East Road, 20 minutes southeast of Browning. That's where her maternal aunt's boyfriend, Hahawks VL, said he'd taken Arden to do some target practice. He's been widely referred to as her uncle in the press, and it is true that he was dating a member of her family, but they were not blood-related. KPAX reported that it was around 7 p.m. that VL reported last seeing Arden. He said that he got distracted with his shooting, and when he looked back around, she was gone. It would be hours before law enforcement was called and she was reported missing. Some sources say that her footprints were found in the snow, not far from the riverbank's edge. The searches, they went on for weeks, first officially and then organized by the community. But Arden still was not found. There were perhaps clues, but not proof of what had happened to her. Arden Pepion is the daughter of Arbana and Aaron Pepion and was the youngest in her family. She grew up in Browning on the Blackfeet Reservation and she was deeply beloved. Her family didn't even know that she was out at 2 Medicine that day, not until it was too late. Arden's paternal grandmother, Irene, and her older cousin, Asia, sat down with us in the late spring of 2026 to discuss what their family has been through. It was difficult for Irene, so hard that Asia had to take over the interview and walk us through their experiences. Because, as she said, the pain had not begun in April of 2021. At that point, when Arden vanished, they had not seen her for 8 months, and that wasn't by choice. We began our conversation by learning more about Irene's family, her children, and her grandchildren, and Aaron, Arden's father.
I grew up in Browning, Montana, on the Blackfeet reservation. John Little Dog and Margaret DeRouche Little Dog. Those are my parents. And I had 7 sisters and 2 brothers, and I'm the youngest in my family. I have 6 kids, and they all grew up here in Browning, raised them here in Browning. One lives in Cut Bank, and one lives in Utah with her family. And she's my youngest that live in Utah, Charmaine. I had Mario, Clarissa, Aaron, Clinton, Rachel. Rachel died when she was an infant. Just when I had her, she passed away. And then we adopted two girls. That's Loretta and Charmaine. So I have 7 altogether.
Aaron eventually met Arbana. She had 1 daughter from a previous relationship, and together they had 3 more children. Arden came along in September of 2017, and she joined a large family that enjoyed gatherings at Irene's home.
I have 23 grandkids, and then I have about 5 great-grandkids, and then I have 1 great-great-granddaughter. You know, as a family, we would get together. They would always be there, you know, those kids. They would always be at our family gatherings and come to our home, you know, and stay.
One of Arden's very favorite people was her older cousin, Asia. She was not just family. She was also part of the caregiving village for Arden. With her parents at work and 3 of her older sisters in school, childcare needed to be sorted, and that's where Asia stepped in.
My granddaughter, Asia, she would always take care of Arden. She was in high school then, and she would bring her to school with her. You know, she was in a Buffalo High Academy, and Asia watched her all the time while Aaron was at work.
So my uncle had asked me if I would get on this program. It's for local babysitters, basically, but you get approved to be like a childcare person. I started to pick them up in the mornings. Usually the older girls would just go to school, and I would just take Arden on the days that I would attend school. And she would come with me, and she really enjoyed herself. And the people at the academy, they really enjoyed her company too. They all still remember her, and they have pictures up of her to this day, of me and her, and also of her missing poster. And she was just really like a really bright and just playful little girl. She was just a little baby that you could just look at, and she would just make you smile just the way she was. She always would be running around. Whenever her dad would drop her off, because sometimes he would bring her out before he went to work, he usually would have to sneak out because she would know when he was leaving, and she would just stay clung to him. She wouldn't want him to leave. And so we would have to distract her, and then he would get out the door, and finally she would look around for him, and she would start crying. But she would calm down after a while when we would tell her that her dad's going to be right back. She was really close to her dad and her sisters. I remember when I would be changing her or getting her ready, and her sister, the middle sister, was Maddie. She would always say, "Let me do it." she's my baby, let me do it. And she would just try and take her out of my hands and grab her stuff. Sometimes I would just let her do it because she was just so determined to get it done. At my grandma's, we have a fenced yard and it goes all the way around the house. I would bring them out there and she just loved to be outside. She would be running around. At the time, there was like a little, those little playgrounds you could set up yourself. There was one of those, so she was always playing on the swings. There was a trampoline. She would get up there with her sisters. She always would just run around outside. And then when we would be inside, it was her sitting there with her sisters playing around. It wasn't really like certain things. It was just the toys they brought with them. They would just play around and she would just be right there with them. Even though she was smaller than them, she was always by them and they were always all playing together or watching movies. She was always right there with them. She would just follow them all over. There's videos I have of her and she's dancing. Any music that comes on, she would just start dancing.
Arbana, Arden's mother, remembered similar things to KRTV. She told the station, quote, she loved music. She loved doing TikTok videos with her sisters. She was just a very, very outgoing girl. For a 3-year-old, she was very smart. According to the Missoulian, Arden, nicknamed Artie by family and friends, was a child who Irene noted, quote, really has her own little personality. Arden was especially, quote, obsessed with anything related to the Disney movie Frozen and loved its music. But again, what she loved most was being around her relatives.
I'm Hannah. I've lost 75 pounds in 20 months with GLP-1s, plus diet and exercise. On Ro, I've gone from struggling to run a mile to running farther every day. You can access FDA-approved GLP-1s online. Get the support you need to reach your weight loss goals. Go to ro.co/weight to see if you qualify. I'm a paid Ro partner. 20% average weight loss in 1 year in non-diabetics with obesity or overweight with a weight-related medical condition versus 3.1% in placebo arm. RX only. To stay informed about serious side effects, go to ro.co/safety.
Most people overpay for car insurance, not because they're careless, but because switching feels like too much hassle. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/Libsyn today. That's JERRY.ai/LIBSYN.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
In the latter part of 2020, Arden and her sisters were placed by social services with their maternal family. They were still living there in the spring of 2021, and there wasn't contact with paternal relatives. That's why, Irene says, her parents and other relatives were not aware that she'd been taken out by her aunt's boyfriend. Weather reports from that time indicate it was extremely cold, and snow was still on the ground. It was a frigid period to spend so much time outside. But according to Hahawks VL, that's what he decided to do. As we told you before, he was not a blood relative. Rather, he was the boyfriend of Arbana's sister, Kimberly. The Pepion family told us that they did not know him at all.
It was to the point we didn't even know how he looked. We knew his name, and we didn't know how he looked until maybe a little bit after that. We didn't even know that they were the ones who had him, that him and the girls' aunt had them when they weren't supposed to have them. They were supposed to be with their grandmother. And also, the taking them out to go shooting is not understandable because in this town, everybody thought the same thing. Who takes a baby out when you're going to go shoot your gun? And that's something nobody would do. I mean, some people probably would, but they would have their significant other in the car with them. They wouldn't have the kids out where, an accident could happen. Anything can happen when you're shooting a gun.
There is only one person who knows for sure exactly what happened on April 22nd, 2021. We'll tell you the story as it has been laid out by Hahawks VL to officials and to the media, and then circle back to what Arden's family knew and did not know that spring. According to an interview that VL gave the Missoulian, he confirmed he was the one with Arden on the night that she went missing. Her sisters were not along for the trip, just the two of them. VL told the paper the two had gone to the 2 Medicine area near Joe Show East to hang out so that he could practice shooting. He noted this wasn't an unusual outing, explaining that, quote, she had been with me before when I was shooting. They were out at the river for some time. Precisely how long, we aren't sure. But eventually, VL said that he got distracted. VL claimed he only realized Arden was gone while he was in the middle of reloading his gun. After looking around the area, he said he spotted her footprints leading toward the river, starting about 40 or 50 yards from the water. While his girlfriend Kimberly Higgins, Arden's aunt, was not initially at the river with them, reporting has indicated that she joined him there to help look. Higgins then called law enforcement to report the disappearance. But that phone call did not happen right away. According to KRTV, Arden wasn't reported missing until 5 hours after she vanished, a delay that led to growing calls for transparency and intense frustration within the community. And, as the Great Falls Tribune reported, that gap in time left many wondering why an Amber Alert wasn't issued. Per the Missoulian, Blackfeet Law Enforcement Services explained that Arden's disappearance had not met the criteria for an Amber Alert because there was no report of an abduction. When law enforcement arrived on scene, it's reported that they discovered those footprints in the snow, and that led them to believe Arden had wandered off, that she'd possibly fallen into the river. It was exactly the kind of thing that Asia told us she'd be afraid of keeping an eye on such a small child in a dangerous area. She said that she would have objected if she'd known. She would have had something to say about a toddler being taken out to a shooting range in the cold, in the dark. But no one told her. No one told any of them, Asia says, until the next morning.
I lived with my dad during this time, and that morning I'd woken up because my door was open and so was his, and our rooms were close. So I heard his phone ringing. And his phone is pretty loud, and him and his girlfriend at the time were sleeping, and I didn't hear anybody move around. So I was just about to turn over and go back to sleep when my phone started to ring, and I'd say this was about 6 o'clock to 6:30. It was my grandma. So I answered it, and I can always tell when something's wrong when my grandma, when it's something urgent with family, just the way her voice sounded. And she had asked for my dad. So I went into his room and I woke him up, and I'd given him the phone, and it wasn't on speaker at first. And then he just got up and then he had turned it on speaker, and he started talking, and my grandma, her voice started to break, and she said that Arden was missing. And right then and there, it just felt like my heart was just sunk so deep, and I just felt like I was just frozen. And my dad, he just shot right up. And he just said, what do you mean? And she said, I got a call saying that she was missing. And she had told us it was down on Joe Show Road. And so she said that she was still in Great Falls picking up my uncle, Arden's dad.
It's lucky Irene was up so early that day because she was able to organize the family quickly and head to the river, where, with the arrival of authorities, a large-scale search effort had begun.
My grandma said that she would come and pick us up as soon as she got back, that they were just heading back. Her and my grandpa had picked me up and we went out. As we were inching towards the Joe Show Road, I just had felt myself getting more and more scared to get there and figure out what was going on and to figure out the circumstances of why she was missing, or if it was just something that somebody had said. Everything was just going through my mind at the time. And we had gotten down there and there was so much people there. I couldn't even comprehend who they were. It was really muddy. It was so muddy that when I got out, I had just regular shoes on. And when I walked over to that tent, that my shoes had just gotten really caked with mud. And so I was looking for my uncle, and all those people, I think it was the police, the fire department, and a few other people who had come to help search, and they were already sending people out. They were briefing them on what to do if they had found her, and they were telling them which ways to go, and they were sending people in groups. And I remember I just started to cry because I didn't understand what was going on, and I didn't know what to think or what to even feel about the situation. And then I just remember after that, they just continued to search. And every day just felt like just heavy and sad. And all I could think about was just her every day. My grandparents were always out there. They were bringing out the donations of the food, the water to the people who would come out and search.
What Asia could not understand was the gap in time between when Arden allegedly disappeared and when authorities were alerted. She thinks about the search time that was lost, and she can't understand putting Arden at that kind of risk.
The first thing you're going to do is go and call the police. You're not going to wait for your significant other to get off work. You're not going to go and call them first. You're going to call the police because there's a little girl, a baby missing, and it's snowing out and it's cold.
We asked Asia and Irene if the family had been able to view Arden's reported footprints, that trail that led 40 or 50 yards by the river, for themselves.
Yeah, so we were told about the footprints too, but one thing we had thought too is, as it was snowing, but he had said initially she went missing at 7, her footprints would have been covered by then. And for him to say that he had just turned around and she was gone didn't make very much sense, because she wasn't that type of, baby, little girl to just wander off. She was one who would stick right next to you. If she wasn't right next to you, she would be around the vehicle. She would not have went walking down. It must have been dark at the time. It being winter, it was dark. She wouldn't have done that. She wouldn't have just walked off. And another thing, she wouldn't have went by the water. She was not very fond of being around water.
There was something else, too. Asia claims that VL did not remain at the river during the entire time frame his independent search was supposed to be taking place. Rather, she says, there's proof he drove into town. It may have been to call his girlfriend to aid in the search. Asia simply does not know. We have not been able to corroborate that information with an outside source, but Asia says that she clearly recalls hearing of the event.
I don't know if they have this footage still or who had it, but they had caught him on video coming to the local gas station, and he was by himself when he had come to town. And that was like right after he had said she was missing. And then during that time is when they had said he had made that call to Kim.
Perhaps the delay in alerting the police or other family comes down to a fear of getting in trouble. But it pushed the beginning of an official search for Arden into the late night and early morning hours, when it was coldest and darkest and most difficult to try and trace her. There was an early report of Arden's clothing given to the searchers, and based on what we have found, it has been the primary description that's used to this day. According to the Great Falls Tribune, the initial details released described Arden wearing a purple jacket with a unicorn design on the front, a gray sweater, black leggings, and black boots with green trim. Later, that was updated. She was eventually described as wearing a gray Glacier brand sweatshirt, not a unicorn jacket. But that new information never made its way into many media reports. And her clothing was important. According to Asia, the revised description was released because the original clothing was found, not in the woods, but in VL's vehicle. We aren't precisely sure of the order of events here, or when the truck was searched, whether it was during the initial official response or later, or what items might or might not have been found. Like so many aspects of Arden's case, it's difficult to confirm certain details without a case file. We reached out to Blackfeet Law Enforcement Services and the BIA for comment on this, but did not hear back, so we cannot absolutely confirm this story. The important part is, though, that the initial description was incorrect, and we can't verify why. Asia, though, she says that she has a distinct memory of when she found out, because it affected the missing persons flyers that her family had just created.
I had remembered that they had these flyers. They were little, not really tiny ones, half of a regular page of a paper. And they were her flyers of what she was wearing, just her whole description. And I remember there was a really thick packet of them. And my grandma had picked me up and they were on her dashboard. And I asked her how come they weren't handed out yet. And she had told me that it was because they changed what she was wearing. And I told her, it kind of surprised me when she said that. And then it kind of got me angry. And I asked, what do you mean they changed what she was wearing? And so what had happened was the first description of what they said she was wearing, they changed it to her wearing, I believe, just a sweater, mismatched shoes, and leggings. But in the beginning, the first one, she had boots on and she had a jacket, a big jacket, I believe. And this is the part that really gets me angry, is because they had checked his truck and they found what they said she was wearing in his truck. I believe they found her other boot and they found her jacket in that truck. And that's when they changed it.
The search for Arden continued. Her father, Aaron, and other family members were searching and handing out flyers every single day, but it was not easy to cover the terrain. According to the Missoulian, former Blackfeet Tribal Business Council Secretary Mark Pollock explained that only about 18 tribal police officers are tasked with patrolling the reservation, a territory that spans 1.5 million acres. And Pollock also noted that there are times when just 2 officers are responsible for the entire reservation and its 10,000 residents. So Blackfeet Law Enforcement Services called in assistance from outside law enforcement, and the community was essential in the search as well. As the Billings Gazette wrote, quote, more than 150 members of the Blackfeet community showed up to search for her. They brought dogs and flashlights. One of those people was Diana Bird, a local who would eventually head up intensive community efforts to find Arden. She was frustrated by the lack of organization in the early days of the mission. Bird told the Billings Gazette, quote, nobody was collaborating. Everybody wanted to be the boss. It was horrible. Volunteers were left wondering, what exactly should we look for? How should we organize the group? Who's in charge? James McNeely, a public information officer, told KPAX that the operation used every tool available. Quote, we've had some helicopters, drones and things of that nature, divers. The focus is the river right now. The Bureau of Indian Affairs and irrigation officials actually, quote, redirected river water from the Two Medicine into an irrigation ditch to lower water levels and assist searchers. And the search brought its own dangers, too. According to KRTV, searchers were navigating an area where they, quote, encountered a bear, a mountain lion, and coyotes, and where open gates left, quote, cattle, horses, and bison on the road. The Independent Record reported that the ground was, quote, inundated with animal bones, which complicated the search for human remains. However, the volunteers were driven by a discovery that was made fairly early on in the search. On April 25th, 2 days after she went missing, something was found. Arden's footprints had been their only major clue and led to the fear that she might have fallen into the river itself. And then the team recovered one of her boots in the river. Asia says that the boot that matched it was allegedly recovered in that truck, and that she'd been possibly wearing what Asia described as, quote, mismatched shoes. Again, we can't verify that, but we do know that when her boot was recovered, it was a somber moment. There were already fears that a 3-year-old could not have survived in the frigid conditions, but her shoe in the water seemed to signal that she drowned. Asia says that her family's feelings were complex, incredible grief, but also the hope that Arden would finally be found.
I was relieved at that point because I was thinking, well, maybe now we'll find her, that maybe now we'll be able to have closure and we'll be able to put her to rest. But that wasn't the case.
A day passed, and then another, and then another. There was still no sign of Arden, and that felt strange to her grandmother, Irene, as she told the Missoulian, quote, I think if they found the boot, it seems like they should have found her body by now. Where is she? Did she really go in the river? Arden Marie Pepion was 3 years old when she went missing on April 22nd, 2021. She's a Native American female. At the time of her disappearance, she was approximately 3 feet tall and weighed around 30 pounds, with dark brown hair and brown eyes. Her ears are pierced. When last seen, she was wearing a gray pullover sweatshirt with glacier printed across the front and black leggings. Anyone with information about Arden's whereabouts can contact the Bureau of Indian Affairs at 1-833-560-2065. Text BIA MMU at 847-411 or email OJS_MMU at BIA.gov. There had been a $10,000 reward in Arden's case, but her family tells us that, to their knowledge, it's no longer available. Next time on The Fall Line, the search for Arden continues, and her family's frustration reaches a breaking point. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcast, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so that you do not miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is created by Laura Norton and Brooke Hargrove. The show is written, hosted, researched, and produced by Laura Norton. Engineered by Southern Gothic Media and Rachel Boyd. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's LIBSYN, ads.com today.